good now? Oh, we're live. Hey! Sorry, we're new. My name's Angel. Thank you for tuning in on the Wednesday in the Word. We're changing things up here. Normally you see Peter's lovely face, and we kicked him out, and we're taking over. Really, we want to talk about pastor appreciation. You know, October is Pastor Appreciation Month, and hold on, my phone is making noise here. October is Pastor Appreciation Month, and we wanted to take a break from the normal programming, basically to honor our pastor. He's a guy that most of us will really only see on a Sunday morning on this platform, and for one reason or another, they don't have the interactions, the everyday interactions that the three of us get to have. One, because we're on leadership, and we hold leadership roles within the church, but also he's walked through some things with us. And so really we're just going to have a candid conversation with the three of us, explaining or telling stories of some of the things that Pastor has walked through with us. And so just a brief introduction. My name's Angel, and I get the opportunity to lead worship in this church, and I also get to lead the young adults in this church. And I've been at Emmanuel now for almost 20 years, and it's been quite a ride, and I'm honored to be in a place where I get to serve others, especially so many people have poured into my life and my development. And now I'm in a position where I get to do that to others now, and it's a great blessing. And so with that, I'll hand the mic over to Josh.
Yeah, my name is Josh. I lead the youth group here at Emmanuel. I've been here, we've been coming here since the 90s. My family moved to the area, and this is where we started going to church. And it's been a great experience. I've had a lot of opportunities, like Angel said, to grow in the church and to also pour into obviously the youth of the church, and it's been a great experience.
My name is Pat Parent. Most of you probably know who I am. I've been coming to the church for, believe it or not, almost 33 years now, or actually it's almost 34 probably. So I started coming when I was about 5 years old. So I've grown up in the different kids ministries that we've had in Awana and youth group myself. I ran the youth group. Actually, Josh was one of the kids in my youth group for a little bit. Currently, I run the drama ministry, the Compellers. I'm starting to be one of the people who help run the men's ministry in the church. I help out with small groups with Peter Clow. I have my own small group as well. And then I just sort of help out wherever else I'm needed with events and things of that nature. So I've been coming to church. Actually, I can't even think what my life was like before church. That's how long I've been coming here. I don't know what it was like outside of Emmanuel, so it's always been a very big part of who I am. And so, I am very privileged to have lucked out and found that right church right at the beginning, and been able to stay in it this whole time, and now be able to be one of the senior leaders in the church and help minister to other people. So I'm pretty excited about tonight.
So one of the things we want to do is we're going to read. Well, I'll read in 1 Timothy chapter 3, and what we have in 1 Timothy chapter 3 are the qualifications of an overseer or a pastor or a bishop, depending on your translation that you're reading. We're going to go through that, and the three of us have already gone through it, and we've picked a different characteristic. One of those qualities that the Apostle Paul lays out here in the book of 1 Timothy with regards to pastor and how that relates to our relationship to our pastor, Pastor Eric Davis. And so, but before I get into that, one of the sayings, the phrases that we have here for those of you who are new to Emmanuel, or you guys just tuning in right now, is bless God, bless others, be the blessing. And I feel like when we take time to bless those that are in leadership, especially our pastor, I believe that does bless God, and it's definitely, it blesses others because it shows our congregation, our people, just the level of respect that we have for the shepherd that God has put over us, and then just being the blessing. I really believe that this blesses our pastor, his family, to know that the men and women of this church, the people that he gets to shepherd, honor him and love him. And so with that, we're reading in the ESV, and it says this in 1 Timothy chapter 3. We're going to read the first 7 verses. The saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of an overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, but not a lover of money. He must manage his own household well, with all dignity, keeping his children in submission. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into the snares of the devil. And so what we have here are basically what the Apostle Paul lays out. And we've already discussed this. And so as we're going through our experiences, I like for you guys that are tuning in to kind of think of, go back through and read that account, the first 7 verses in 1 Timothy, and start thinking about your relationship, specifically as it relates to Pastor Davis. And start thinking about some of the things that he's walked through with you, or just your experiences with him, and where he lines up based on those qualifications. And, for me, it was kind of eye-opening when we stopped and we're just like, well, let's take these verses and see where that lies. And you stop and think, it's like, man, this guy's been everywhere in my life, When you really start and think about it, it's like, it's a testimony or a testament to just faithfulness.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I've read those verses, obviously, growing up. I've heard them preached. I've heard them taught before. But thinking of it and looking at it a different way as I was reading through it, like thinking about Pastor Davis specifically, it shed different light on a lot of what it was said. It was like, how does he meet those qualifications? And just understanding how blessed we are specifically to have Pastor Davis, as opposed to just, you're blessed to have a pastor. We are very blessed to have Pastor Davis and see where he meets those different qualifications. And, when one of the things we said was we were going to pick, 1 or 2 of the qualifications and talk about what he's done in our lives to meet those qualifications. And I'll be honest, it was really hard for me to figure out which specific one I wanted to talk to that wouldn't also bleed out into all the other ones at the same time. So, I think it was a blessing to me to look at those and understand the blessing that we have in Pastor Davis.
Yeah, and I think another thing you touched on, brought this to mind, is for us, like us three, like we've been here for a period of time, right? Like I still, sometimes I still think that I'm one of the new guys, but when they really stop and think, it's like, man, I've been here almost 20 years.
Right,
like I'm not the new guy anymore. But in 40 years of Emmanuel being around, to only have 3 pastors, like that's kind of a testament to just faithfulness, right, to God's word, and just the calling on these guys' lives, and specifically for Pastor Davis now. And I think we've been blessed to not have to have a pastor search committee every 5 years, right? 3 to 5
It's
years.
unheard of.
It really is. And I think what can happen to us is we kind of miss the miracle and blessing of what we have, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you're in it, it's hard to see it.
Right, exactly.
So I figured I'll start and share with mine, and then we can hit Josh, and then Pat, you do yours. And so mine was in chapter 2, the tail end of verse 2 rather, and it says a pastor must be able to teach. And so one of the things, when you stop and think about this, all the other qualifications are character qualities, and this is the only ability-based requirement based on those first 7 verses that we read. And And he has to be able to teach sound doctrine, not just to be able to communicate it in an excellent manner. And so when I think about Pastor Davis, I met him roughly 19 years ago. And as a new Christian, and, I very in and out, not really knowing much of Christianity, just knowing that I had this experience with Jesus and still couldn't even make heads or tails of what I just did and the experience that I had. I just know that something was different. And it's not just Pastor Davis, but specifically just to honor him. I'm a question asker, and I ask a lot of questions, and this is where my daughter gets it from, and it can, she drives me crazy, so I can imagine I drive Pastor crazy.
Yes.
And so,
I'm sure you do.
but I just had a lot of questions, and not being the pastor at that time, just, Eric, to most of us, he would just humbly and confidently just walk through the scriptures with me. And, whatever the situation was, he would just be able to, counsel me based on God's word. Well, let's look at this. Let's see where this goes. And what does the Bible say about this? And here's where you're wrong, or here's what you should be doing. And then as I matured and I grew in grace, and, the questions seemed to get more difficult because life happens, and so you're dealing with more difficult situations. And then when I'm just struggling with unforgiveness in my own heart and resentment in my own heart, and he's able to walk alongside me and handle the word of God in a way that's so prevalent to what I'm going through. Because sometimes we know this stuff innately, but sometimes we need to hear it. And then, he has been the hands and feet of Jesus to me, and being able to guide me, not by his own wisdom, but by the wisdom of the book that has all the authority. And, for me, that's the characteristic that stood out, because when you get to know him as a person, not just as pastor, but for me as a friend, the Bible and Jesus, it's not a thing. It's not a Sunday thing. It is his life. It's woven into everything he does, in his speech, in his mannerisms, and everything he does. He just tries to be gospel-based and faith-based and just kind of live that out as best as he can. And I think it's just awesome just to see him just be real, see him fail, but still be able to have the humility to be able to refer back to God's word and then be able to counsel us. And not just me. I've seen him do it with countless people just in this church and even on this platform, where he's just been able to just grab God's word and show us and guide us and shepherd us in that way. And so, that's definitely where I stand, and just where it's one of the characteristics that sticked out for me.
Yeah.
So,
and the other interesting thing is that it ties into one of the other things where he says he's not a novice, right? When it comes to the Word of God, one of the things that's always been that really stood out with Pastor Davis is it's not that he just knows the Word, right? It's not that he just has memorized different scripture, which I know he has. It's the application piece. So he talks about when Kirsten was in the hospital and he didn't know what else to do, so all he did was open up the Philippians, and he goes through the Philippians 4, and he's just, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are just. And it wasn't just these words that were on a piece of paper and he's just reading them and thinking. He was applying that to his life, and he's taught us to do this. He's taught me to do the same thing. And that's kind of what Angel's saying is, Angel's going through something, and Pastor didn't just say, well, here's some verse, go figure it out. He says, this is what you do to apply it. And he's doing it again even more recently, when he went away recently. He came back with all these new things that he does. So the Word of God is real to him, and it's not just something. It's something that he uses. It's a tool.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I started coming here, like you said earlier, back in the 90s. And to me, just like same with these guys, pastor to me was Mr. Eric. I didn't know pastor other than he was good at playing guitar. He could sing. And I think at the time, I think at the time he led the choir. Yeah. So I didn't know him other than that. But what I did know is that I was a pain in the butt kid, running around the church, always causing trouble. I grew up in his youth group and also Pat's youth group. So, Pat, you can be a testament of how much trouble I was growing up.
Lots of it.
So, but one thing I remember, this was before Pastor Davis was pastor, was he always had grace, he always had patience, and he always had time to sit with me and discipline me when I needed it, but in a way that was effective. And that was before he was pastor. So my memory of Pastor Davis goes back to when I was very young and impressionable. So going on through the years, he also did my marriage counseling, and my wife was also in his youth group. So he's had a lot to do with where we are today and our faith today. And through the years, as I said before, he always took time to mentor us. He always took time to talk and to give me discipline when I needed it. And it wasn't until when my kids were born. My kids were born at 27 weeks, as some of you guys know, and it was an extremely hard time in April and I's life. When Caden was born, he was born at 1 pound 5 ounces, and we weren't sure if he was going to make it. He had 6 surgeries, and Pastor in that time was there for me. He was checking in on us constantly. He came up to visit us, and he offered words that I needed that have changed my life and still affect me till this day. And when I say changed my life, there's no stretch of the word there. The words he said changed my life. And I remember I was driving home one day from work. I was driving home early because April called me and she said Caden had taken a turn for the worse. This was when Caden was in his medically induced coma, and the doctor said at one point, there's just nothing else that we can do. So I called Pastor. I didn't know what to do. I called Pastor, and I was crying hysterically on the phone. I said, Pastor, I don't know why God's doing this. If Caden's going to die, I want him to just take him. And I don't know what Pastor said in that moment, but what I remember is that he was there. He was with me, and he was the pastor that I needed. And I have a unique experience where my kids were in the hospital for a year. So my wife and I moved to Springfield, New Hampshire. So we've been in different churches, and we've seen different pastors. And I can say that from experience, Pastor is one of the most authentic people that I know. Mm-hmm. And that is something that is unique to Emmanuel. Not every church has that, and I appreciate that. And I know these two guys do as well. And I know a lot of people in the church just appreciate that the man you see up on stage is the same man you see during the week, mm-hmm. the same man you see at the football field, the same man you see, whatever he's doing, he's the same man. And for me, that is huge. He doesn't put on a facade of being somebody who he's not. He's who he says he is, and he is who he is up on stage. And so for me, that time when I called him, he was just there for me. He offered me, he comforted me, and he also did say some things to me later on when he came up to visit. Him and I were sitting in the cafeteria at the hospital, and he said, and this is one of the things I do remember that he said to me. He said, "You have to decide now if you're going to be okay if God decides to take Caden. Are you going to let it destroy you, or are you going to let it bring you closer to him?" And to be honest with you, I was definitely leaning on the side of I'm going to walk away. And for me, I needed Pastor to say that to me. And if it was anybody else who said it to me, it wouldn't have had the same impact. So for me, I was reading through some of the qualifications, and Angel, I think you might have touched on this. Titus 1:9 says that he must have a strong belief in the trustworthy message he was taught. Then he will be able to encourage others with wholesome teaching and show those who oppose it where they are wrong. So the reason why I needed a pastor to say that is because he does believe in the Bible. He believes in the gospel. He believes the gospel is what he preaches, and he lives it out. And I needed somebody with that authenticity, and with his character to say that to me. It couldn't be anybody else. So for me, that was huge. Also in 1 Peter 5:3, it says, "Don't lord over people assigned to your care, but lead them in your own good example." And again, that just for me, that was I needed it to be Pastor because he was those things to me in that time, and he is those things on an everyday basis. Not to paint a false light of him, but he is who he is, who He is up on stage, and he does have these qualifications that we're talking about, which allows him to be effective as the pastor of this church.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it allows him to have that authority to speak into our lives, to say those hard things, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you could say, like, even if you think about, like, you know, your kids are young, but, like, even just our own kids, like, as dads, there are certain things that we can say to our kids that no one else can say, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same impact. And, you know, through years just building that type of trust, you know, it's crazy because, you know, speaking of Kirsten, you know, you'll hear, this is no secret, you know, you'll hear pastors say from the platform that, you know, God allowed them to go through whatever it is with Kirsten, you know, and part of that is sharing the story, but a part of that is just his experience, right? Not many pastors can walk into a hospital, to walk into a situation such as yours, where your kids are literally the size of these water bottles right here, like, and I remember it vividly. And same thing with my niece, when my niece was in the hospital and she was gonna pass, and pastor came down and he just, because of his experience, the things that God has allowed him to walk through, I'm not sure if he even realizes this, but like when it comes to traumatic experiences, you know, people's houses catching on fire in the middle of the night, people being rushed to the hospital, when he walks into a hospital, it's just like, it is so bizarre just how he can just, like being on the platform, he can command the stage, he knows the questions to ask, he knows who to talk to, where to go, resources, and, you know, that's just a testament to what God has allowed him, the trial for him to go through, and he uses his experience to bless his congregation, right? And so that's, it's really awesome.
And I like some of the stuff that you said about how, like, you know, growing up, he disciplined you when you needed discipline, and you know, he's gentle when he needs to be gentle, and you know, the fact that you have this man who can love you so much, and then bluntly and directly correct you when he needs to. You know, I mean, not everyone could have looked at Josh and said, "You need to decide right now."
Yeah.
I mean, in the direct manner that he did, but still showing that love and that care for you.
Yeah, and it was weird. Like when he said that to me, like I swear, if it was anybody else, I probably would have just told him to shut up, and I wouldn't have listened. But the way he said it, and just presented it to me, I immediately right there in that moment, I made a decision, and I honestly did not know. And I thought, in that moment, I thought, all right, this is it. Caden is not going to make it. At this point, it was much longer than they had anticipated that he was going to be in the medically induced coma. So, I mean, at that point, I decided in my life that no matter what happens, April and I were going to make this, and we're going to take it and turn it into honor God. And obviously, thankfully, Caden is still with us today, but I can't imagine I don't know if he thought about it and he was like, okay, this is what I'm going to say to Josh, or if like God just kind of gave him some divine wisdom and said, all right, this is what you need to say to Josh. But like that moment is going to, I mean, I'm 28 years old now. Back then, I think I was 24. That moment is going to affect the rest of my life. It affects how I do ministry. It affects how I live my life. And it's just, I just have so much respect for him because of what he said. Like he basically told me that I have to decide if I'm gonna be okay. He did tell me I have to decide if I'm gonna be
straight up.
He told me I have to decide if I'm gonna be okay. If I'm gonna be okay with God if my son dies.
Right.
And like I just have so much respect for him for that. And even before then, growing up, being the punk kid, like all those steps needed to happen for him to be able to speak to me the way he did, and to say what he said to me.
Right.
And it's just a huge testament to who he is and the legacy that he's had in the past 20 years of Emmanuel, or 30 years, however long it's been that he's been here. They're over 30 years.
And speaking to legacy, just for viewers that are tuning in and you know, maybe you're just coming into this or whatever, maybe you don't know Pastor Davis. I mean, Pastor Davis has been in this church since he was 16 years old, right? And so it's just again, God's provision, God's blessing, you know, for a kid to come in, you know, I mean, I didn't know him then, I wasn't even around, but you know, probably a punk, you know, we hear the stories of his skinny white jeans and his
jeans, yeah,
and his
that.
perm. The pictures are classic, but you know, 16 years old and to be discipled and to come up and then eventually be lead pastor of the place that you started coming to church to. I mean, it's wild. And then to still stay here, like it's just, to God be the glory, It's really, really good. So
Absolutely.
Josh, thanks for sharing that. It's amazing, when you stop and you think of just, even more stories now are coming to my head of just some of the different things that I've gone through, and he's been right there, right? Just that faithful friend and someone that you can lean on, so.
So speaking about when he first started coming, so about 33 years ago, like I said, I started coming to church, and I remember I was down back, I walked in those front doors, I was probably about 5 or 6 years old, and I walked into Awana, and back then it was Sparky's, it's just like Awana now. It's like a kids ministry, for those of you who don't know what that is. They teach kids the Bible. First person I saw when I walked in was this tall, really gangly guy, real thin, who we referred to as Mr. Eric back then. I was shy, I didn't know anyone, so I sat against the wall, and he came down and he sat on the wall next to me, and he proceeded to teach me John 3:16. So I didn't know anything about the Bible, I didn't know anything about God, I was still young, it was the first time I'd ever been in a church that I can remember. And here's this man teaching me John 3:16, I passed that verse, and he, from that moment on, he's been an influential part of my life. Titus 1:7, it talks about how a pastor needs to be a steward. Some say steward, translations say steward, some say overseer. Regardless, in the Greek it means that they are held responsible, or they're responsible to be guardians over the church. And he is responsible for the people that are in this church. And I think that responsibility, whether it was the actual call of being a pastor or not, I think that started much earlier than when he actually became pastor. And I know he's been a steward of my growth, my development, my spiritual life since I've known my whole relationship with him. And over the years, he was my Sparky leader, and I remember he'd march me around the room and teach me different verses of the Bible, and like just really inspire me, encourage me. And one year I gave him, and he actually has it hanging on his wall in his office, but it's the Sparky Award, which means I passed all the books or whatever. He inspired me to be more than what I was. So he was my Awana leader, and then growing up, he became my youth leader. He was my teen leader for a while for the Frogs. Those of you who were Frogs back then, the Faithful Frogs. My teen leader, and then later on, he even was my young adult leader for a little bit, for a short time, and now he's my pastor. And every single step of the way, he was there when I faced different hard times in my life and different struggles. All the things that come from being a teenager and trying to live a life for God, and then being rebellious, and then living for God and being rebellious. He was there and never gave up on me. And I can remember often, if I was, especially as a teen, if let's say I wasn't living my life right, or I sinned, or I did something I shouldn't have done, or whatever. He didn't know that I had done that, but I remember I'd walk into church and I would hide out. Like I'd try to stay away from him, because I knew that if he saw me, he'd come up and be like, "Hey, what's going on? Everything good?" And I don't think, maybe he did, maybe he had some kind of divine knowledge, but I don't think he knew what it is that whatever I had just done, or whatever I was just thinking of that I shouldn't have been. But he would crack me, man, every single time. It was like he knew, and the Spirit would just fall on me and convict me or encourage me, or whatever it was, whatever I was going through. And there's not, I'm a pretty emotional guy, but there's not a lot of people in the church who could, like, he could say just a certain word back then, and I would just be a ball, right? And I would just start crying or whatever. And so that was my life with him growing up. I looked up to him. He was my hero for a long time. And there was two men in my life that really meant something big to me. It was my dad, who's still one of my heroes, and Pastor Davis, who's one of my heroes. Someone that I consider him a mentor and a friend. And I'm blessed to say that he not only married me and Allie, but he was one of my groomsmen in the wedding. So 1 Peter 5:2, and actually Josh read the second part of it, but the first part of it is shepherd God's flock among you, not overseeing out of compulsion, but willingly as God would have you. So that stewardship that Pastor had, the responsibility that he took about this for this church, it continued obviously as he became pastor. So the story that I want to share, one of the most impactful things that he's ever done in my life. It may not be anything that anyone knows. So when Allie had Owen, our youngest son, she went through severe postpartum, to the point where the doctors were concerned. I was concerned. I remember being at work, and I was just a wreck. I I didn't know how we were going to make it through. It got to the point where she was offering Owen up to other people. Not that they would ever take him. Well, maybe they would, but I don't think she actually would do it. But it was that severe. She was just depressed. It was like she was like a shell of who she was. She was never happy. She wouldn't let me watch him, and here I am, this husband who loves this woman, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't help her. And I was just at my wit's end, and my parents were there, and every once in a while, Allie would let my mom watch him, so she would go to bed and she'd sleep. And meanwhile, I'm sitting here, and I feel bad because I'm discouraged, I'm depressed, but I'm not the one going through it. She is, and I'm just at a loss. And I had no idea, and I just felt completely lost, completely separated from God. And there was one day in particular, it was a Wednesday night, and it just, everything came to a head. And my parents were there, and Allie was just beside herself, and I didn't know what else to do. And just like Josh said, I just picked up the phone and called the person who I thought could help, and it was Pastor. And back then it was a Wednesday night, and you didn't miss church, right? You didn't miss church on a Wednesday. And I remember thinking like, oh crud, I'm going to miss church because I have to deal with this, which is a terrible way to feel, and you shouldn't feel that way, but
Yeah.
I did. And I called Pastor, and I remember it was he didn't give me words of advice over the phone. It wasn't anything like that. He says, I'll be right there. That was it. I'll be right there. And he gave up the church service. And again, those of you who've grown up in the church, you know what that meant back then. Yeah. That was a big deal. Yeah. And within minutes, he's knocking on our door, and he comes inside. And I remember we were sitting at the dining room table, and he's talking, and I couldn't begin to tell you what he was saying. Yeah. I don't even know if it was all that profound. I really don't. I don't know if there was no magic words that fixed everything, because we still had to deal with it afterwards. But the fact that he showed up, and he was there, and he was present. And so in the midst of this crazy hard situation, and in many situations, like what Josh is talking about, situations I know Angel has gone through, here comes Pastor, and he has to embody God at that moment. Mm. Yeah. In whatever the situation is, and I think this is what we take for granted. Whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning, whether it's the middle of the day, something happens, Pastor has to step in. And it doesn't matter that he had a bad day. It doesn't matter that he just fought with Trish, right? It doesn't matter that he's mad at his kids or whatever. He has to let that go and show up as Jesus for his flock. Yeah. And that's what he was. He shows up at my house, and he is just Jesus in that moment for me. Yeah. Because there was no other Jesus for me. It couldn't be. And he comes in and he gives that, he talks to us, and he's supportive, and he's there for us. And I'm certain it was uncomfortable for him. I'm sure he didn't have the right words to say, and he had to rely on the Spirit. But as our pastor and as a faithful steward to the members of this church, or to me as one of the members of his church, he was there for me, and it's something I'll never forget. I'll never be able to look at Pastor without feeling that there's just undeserving love that he gave me despite.
And to that point, it's kind of weird when you're going through a crisis in your life and Pastor shows up, specifically Pastor Davis. When he gets there, like another example is the same son who was born extremely early, or the one that was 1 pound 5 ounces. He had an event about a year ago now where he stopped breathing. We had to call the ambulance. He had to go to the hospital, and I was actually here in the leadership meeting, and I was like. I got a call from my brother actually, and they're like, "Hey, they're doing CPR on Caden." So I was like, "Here we go again." So I get up. Pastor's like, "Everything all right?" I'm like, "Nope." He's like, I said, "I'm going to the hospital." He's like, "I'll be right there." So I think he said the meeting was short.
Yeah, you cut it short.
And then next thing you know, Pastor's walking into the hospital right behind us, and again, I don't remember what he said. Just like same thing with you guys, but I remember when he got there, I felt peace. Like I didn't know what was going to happen in April, and I didn't know what was going to happen with Caden at that time. He actually ended up going back up to Dartmouth. It seems like we can't get away from that place, but again, he was there. He offered words of encouragement, and whatever it was about him being in the room when you're going through a crisis in your life, there's a peace about it, and there's a peace that only Pastor can give. Right. And I don't want to speak for other churches, but I know here at Emmanuel we have something special with Pastor Davis. And we have something unique with Pastor Davis that other churches may not be as fortunate to have, and I just think it's huge.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of just listen to you guys. talk, it just brings back, you brought to mention just, there's a theme, like I see, it's like, when, whatever it is, crises or even good things, it's not always bad, right?
Yeah,
It's celebration, I mean, there's something about when, specifically like Josh said, when our pastor walks in the door, there's a level of comfort, there's a level of familiarity, there's a level of just respect, And so you guys were bringing me back to, in 1 Timothy 5:17, let the elders who rule well be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in preaching and teaching. And it's not that, we don't want people to misunderstand, at the end of the day, he's just a man, right?
Yeah,
And
right,
he
yeah.
struggles with the same struggles that we have, right? But unlike us, he's got a different calling on his life. And so he can walk in, he's been equipped, supernaturally to walk into situations where life is literally on the line,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Families are on the line. By God's grace, be able to navigate those waters. Like you said, we don't know what he said,
Yeah,
right? Well, you
yeah.
look back, I have no idea what he said. He could have just said, God's got this. We don't know,
Yeah.
but it's just, he's our pastor, And so, and I think, when you stop and you think about, not just our pastor, but all pastors, the ones that are true to their calling, the double honor thing, you think about not only their own struggles, right? They're ministering to their home, their family, their kids, their wives, and then, like you said, there could be something going on that maybe it's unresolved at home, and then next thing you know, the phone rings and he's got to drop it, and he's got to get there, and he's got to do that. And church, we say this not to build him up to a godlike status, but he is worthy of double honor. And for those of you who have, maybe you haven't you haven't put forth the effort to get to know him, I would challenge you within, this coming year, your time here at Emmanuel, reach out, have coffee. He's always willing to have dinner with people, coffee with people, and they love to do that. He is hospitable. It's one of the, it's one of those things. He's always willing. It's always open, but he's a man that you can tell when you're around him that he's definitely called to this, because anyone else would quit.
Yeah.
Especially
after what he's been through.
Yeah, exactly. Especially what he's been through.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback on one of the things that Angel said is, when you see people who are in that type of position, especially a pastor who is good and loves his church, loves his people, and has been so supportive and available for us, it is very easy to almost look at him in a godlike way, right? We talked about he enters these situations and he has to embody Jesus for his congregation, and it's very hard sometimes to separate the fact that, yes, he's representing Jesus in that moment, but he is not Jesus, he is not God. And this is twofold. The reason why this is important to understand that is, number one, we can't hold him at such a standard or the same standard as God. He is not God.
Yeah.
He is a man who's been, like Angel said, empowered by the Spirit to do the great things that he's done.
Yeah.
And we can't look at him like a God, and we can't hold him to a standard where we expect him to be perfect.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can just kind of echo like what Matt Chandler says, like, we make horrible gods, right? And we need to be careful that we don't elevate him to that position, because here's the thing, he's going to let us down,
Right,
yeah.
right?
Right.
He's going to let us down. And then at that moment, kind of like what Pastor said to Josh, when he does let you down, because he's going to let you down, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to walk away?
Right.
Are you going to disregard him as your pastor? And so that's where we, like you said, it's a fine line to walk there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last part of that, of my my kind of part here that I wanted to emphasize is, I know we talked about a lot of crises and stuff like that, as Angel said, but one of my favorite things to do, and I know you guys can piggyback on this as well, is I have the opportunity during the week. It could be 10 o'clock on a Tuesday or 1 o'clock on a Thursday or a Friday. I'll text Pastor, be like, hey, you around? And either he'll say yes or no, I'm busy. But when he says yes, come on to the church, I'll sit down with Pastor and I'll kill 2 hours just talking about
easy.
life,
Yeah. Easy,
ministry. whatever.
Sometimes I just come by just to see if he's there, just so I can bug him.
Oh yeah, yeah. So that is one of my favorite things to do now. I just did it last Thursday or last Friday. Just sat down with him and killed 2 hours, just talking about whether it's fall, trunk or treat or youth group and then we talk about life, life, and that is something that I just love to do with Pastor. It's just awesome to be able to have that friendship, but also have that pastor who is also a friend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's probably a very rare thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I think one of my favorite things to do with pastors is pick on them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the fact that we have a pastor we can have that type of relationship with is really good. And when Angel talked about giving him double honor, keeping in mind that he is a man who God's using. Honor is more than just it's not worship, right? It's the honor that maybe we need to bestow upon pastors. Maybe a little more grace, knowing that he's just a human being who's trying his best with God's power. Maybe we give him some understanding that it can't be an easy job what he does.
Yeah.
And maybe and probably most importantly, we should honor and love the fact that we have this man who loves this church, and all of you who are watching, that he loves us enough that he's willing to take on that sacrifice. I think about Paul, and he's been preaching about Paul with his story series, and he talks about one of the things I was talking to him before he preached the message, and how much it stood out to him that he's reading the book of Acts, and when Paul gets called, they tell Ananias to go find Paul, because God has told him what he will suffer for God.
I know.
And it's crazy. And
It's like-
I don't think Pastor thought this.
Yeah.
He said that to me, and then I thought it again when he preached on that Sunday, and I said, that sounds like Pastor. Like, Pastor was called to suffer for this church.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the double honor is, right? You want to honor Pastor, maybe you don't push back on every single thing or find any way to every fault in him. He's not above everyone else,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
exactly.
I mean, we all fail. You fail every day. How would you like it if Pastor knocked on your door and said, "Hey, I just saw what you watched on TV.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
saw what you said to your wife. Let's give him that understanding." To me, that's part of the double honor, right? That we're going to show pastors that understanding and that love back.
Yeah.
For the love that he's shown us.
That's good. I mean, it's so good, and I'm glad that we were able to have this candid discussion. And there was supposed to be someone else with us, but they couldn't make it. And we really want to just kind of share really with our congregation, just some of our experience, some of our walks, and some of the things. And like you said, like it is cool to have just that pastor that's willing to get down in the dirt with you, and it's funny when he still thinks that he's young and he can hack it, and then he really can. It's like, and like Pat said, we can tease him and he takes it well.
Yeah.
But
and teases back.
and teases back,
Yeah.
So you just better be ready for it. But it's just a testament to, again, we want to give God honor and glory in this, as we appreciate our pastor, during this time, and just the way he leads, and we think about the crises of COVID, and just trying to navigate these waters of, everyone has an opinion about what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, and I don't envy his position, it's we get together and we discuss these things, but it's tough stuff.
Yeah.
It's tough stuff, and he's definitely called to lead this church to wherever God wants it to go, for this season, and it's great. It's great to be a part of that,
And to pull the curtain back a little bit, Angel mentioned this a little bit, when COVID happened, and really when anything that the church has dealt with, as a pastor, it can be very easy for him to just say, "This is what we're doing, the end. I'm the pastor,
Sure.
and what we're doing." And as if you were a fly on the wall when we had those meetings, he is not like that at all.
No.
He wants to know what the other leaders think. He wants to know what our insights are, what our opinions are. He values those, right? Even if they turn out to not be what we do, he values those, and that is a very rare thing probably with many pastors,
Yeah.
is that he wants to talk about this, and even sometimes at nauseam, where we're sitting there going, all right, we've talked about this enough, we know the answer, but he wants to make sure that we're listening to the Spirit, and that we're, that he's not going to make that decision completely on his own. He values that, right? And that's a biblical principle that he follows, is that he doesn't neglect the counsel of others, and that in and of itself is a really great thing.
Yeah. And so I think with that, it's it's quarter of, and I think with that, I think it's a good spot to kind of end. We do have one kind of final closing question, and it's just more just in general. And so I'll ask the question, and then you guys answer this. And you guys at home, or those of you that are tuned in, feel free to put this in the chat. Your answers, and we'll take a look at those. But in general, do you feel the public or even Christians, even Christians view the role of a pastor differently these days compared to decades ago? Like, what do you think? Like, as far as how either the public or Christians view the role of a pastor? Joshua, you can go.
So I think that the public's perception may be changed, just because, especially right now with COVID and everything that's going on, I don't think the mission or the role of pastor has changed. I mean, the Bible is still the Bible 2,000 years ago, and the Bible is still the Bible today. And I don't think the role of a pastor has changed, but I'm not sure exactly how, but I feel like the public's perception of a pastor is probably different today than it was, say, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like Josh said, I mean, the words that were written were the words that were written. God's word isn't changing, but I do feel that the role itself has changed. Not so much the role, but the complexities of what a pastor has to deal with, right?
Yeah,
like,
what a pastor's doing today versus what a pastor did
Exactly.
20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have social media 20 years ago. They
Yeah,
didn't have, that is something that is part of the church now.
Yeah.
Facebook, all those different apps. So social media, COVID, like Josh said, we've never dealt with that. Politics, I think, we're seeing more and more bleed into the church, and trying to find that balance. For a long time, if you were a Christian, you were a Republican.
Yeah.
And it's just not that cut and dry anymore. So I think, there's a lot of complexity that our pastor deals with, or that pastors today deal with, that maybe they didn't deal with back then. And there's probably some complexities that they dealt with back then that aren't a thing right now. Race is a thing again, but it's not the same as it was maybe back in the 50s, right, where the church had to make a stand one way or the other, and and I think it's starting to get to that point where a church is going to have to make a stand. So I think the role itself is the same and the calling is the same, but I think what they deal with has changed. And I do think that the public does look differently upon pastors as they have in the past. And I think some probably are more stringent, and I think some people are more, a pastor does whatever they want, and or we're not going to hold them to any standard. They can live a sinful life and still be a pastor. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, that's good. I was kind of thinking the same thing as far as the public's view of the position of a pastor. Like, it's not held in high regard. Just clergy in general, right?
Yeah.
You think of. The only time they're held in high regard is if there's a funeral happening.
Or a wedding.
A
Yeah,
wedding,
exactly.
that's it. Yeah. And so, but like you said, the world is ever changing, but the Bible is still true. And, but yeah, so it is crazy. And then, I think even that, the secularism kind of bleeds into the church and bleeds into, our congregation. So sometimes our thinking can become skewed, and so, but thankfully for our pastor, he's true to the word and he's true to his calling, and so we're able to do some course correction there. And I know other pastors that do that as well, but specifically as it refers to or pertains to Emmanuel, I don't know how you could come sit here under his teaching and not regard, just that the authority given to him, by God, and so it's strange times, it really is strange times, but thank you guys for answering those. And so I don't know if anyone answered that online. I don't see anything there, so that's quite all right. But again, guys, in closing, it is it is Pastor Appreciation Month. We would love, I think one way that you could honor Pastor is, just hit him up with some love, his social media, hit him up on Instagram, Facebook, email him, text him, come visit him.
He loves Dunkin' Donuts.
He loves Dunkin' Donuts.
Get him a gift card, buy him coffee. I don't know how he takes it. But
He takes it with sugar.
sugar and hazelnut.
Sugar and cream.
Yeah.
And a little bit of coffee.
Yeah.
But it's we have something special.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was hard for me to see that.
Yeah, me too.
It was hard for me to see. It's easy to become critical.
Yeah.
And so Pastor, if you're watching this, I love you. I know these guys love you. And guys, just listen. We want to show honor to the man of God that's been placed in this here at Emmanuel.
Yeah.
And so, reach out to him, show him some love. And so with that, we're gonna close, and we thank you guys for tuning in. We want to invite you guys out on Sunday. We meet at 10:30 here, 14 Mammoth Road in Hooksett. Tune in online, come on in. We are doing a special service on Sunday to honor Pastor, and so you don't want to miss it. You want to be a part of that, especially if you're a member here at Emmanuel.
Absolutely.
So, with that, we say goodbye, and we'll see you soon. Take care, guys.
Bye.
We love
See ya.
you.